Agatha Christie is the most sold author in the world. Over 2 billion people bought her books and are still buying. No other author has captured their readers like her.
People like it, but who can say why?
But how can a long-dead writer still make readers so addicted to her books? Agatha Christie uses not only the same formula in her novels, but has discovered multiple storytelling techniques that make her novels addicting. But let's start with the first part, the Agatha Christie formula. Even though the stories are all different, Agatha Christie's novels almost always follow the same structure that makes readers addicted. At the core of every Christie novel is first a dead body, and a main character, a detective that either discovers the murder or is called upon to find out who did it. But there's a twist. Only a limited number of people could be the murderer. So as the story unfolds, you have a series of red herrings thrown at the reader, which is only one of the secret techniques Agatha Christie used to keep her readers addicted to the story, but more on those techniques later. So the detective starts to question every suspect, investigates the location of the crime, and carefully finds clues, which allows the reader to try solve the mystery on their own. But just as the reader thinks they know who might have committed the murder, Agatha leads them into a different direction, or even kills off one or a few main suspects. This leaves the reader shocked and confused that they were wrong about the murder's identity. The reader is craving to know the answer and can't put the book away. They are dying to know who did it. So in the last 20 to 30 pages of her books, the main character gathers all the remaining suspects at one location and goes through all the clues, revealing who the murderer is. Just look at this graph and how many of Christie's novels follow this structure. But this structure is not the only thing that makes her novel so addicting. Without the following storytelling techniques, this formula wouldn't be so addictive. And it starts with the first technique, foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is when the author gives the reader a hint about what is going to happen later in the story.
How would you like to spend your last days here?
Oh, no thanks. I think a weekend will be enough.
There are two different types of foreshadowing, direct and indirect foreshadowing. Direct foreshadowing happens when the story gives a clear hint or directly tells you what will happen later. Indirect foreshadowing is subtler. It uses clues, symbols, or events that hint at what's coming, but the reader might not realize until later. For example, a dark storm might hint at trouble ahead. Agatha Christie provides clear hints to the audience that something sinister is about to happen in her novels, and that early on. Let's look at how she did it in one of her most successful novels, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. The fifth sentence of the book is this: "I'm not going to pretend that at the moment I foresaw the events of the next weeks. I empathetically did not so, but my instinct told me that there were stirring times ahead." These sentences make the reader curious from the start. What is going to happen? What are those stirring times going to be? At the end of the first chapter of In Then There Were None, which sold over 100 million copies, an elderly man not only tells the character Mr. Bloor that a storm is coming, but warns him. "Watch and pray," he said. "Watch and pray. The day of judgment is at hand." "I'm talking to you, young man. The day of judgment is very close at hand." Sir Bloor thought to himself, "He's nearer to the day of judgment than I am." But there, as it happens, he was wrong. What you just heard falls under direct foreshadowing. You know as a reader that something bad is about to happen for sure. But foreshadowing wasn't the only thing that made Agatha Christie's readers so addicted to her books. Now to Agatha Christie's most famous and important storytelling technique, the red herring. But what exactly is a red herring and how does it work in Christie's novels? Let's break it down. A red herring is a trick or clue that misleads or distracts readers from the true answer or solution. In a mystery novel is a false lead, something that seems important but in the end has nothing to do with the crime. This technique keeps readers hooked as they try to figure out which clues are real and which are misleading.
Poison glass could mean suicide. An overdose of sedative might have been an accident.
Just imagine, you're reading a detective story where a man has been found dead. The police investigates and find a bloody knife in the drawer. But as the story unfolds, it turns out that the knife wasn't even used in the murder. It's a red herring. It's a clever distraction, making the reader waste time chasing a false lead. So what are some common strategies used for the red herrings? The most common red herrings are innocent characters who were at the scene of the crime, or innocent characters who have strong motives but obviously didn't do the crime. Or even worse, the guilty character appears to be innocent. There seems to be no evidence of motive, weapon, or opportunity. Agatha Christie was a genius at using red herrings in her novels. She would give us several possible clues or characters who seem guilty, only to reveal at the end that none of them were responsible for the crime. This keeps readers guessing and ensures that the big reveal is always surprising. But why are red herrings so effective in keeping the reader hooked to the story? Red herrings add to the tension. When we encounter a clue, we want to make sense of it. We start building theories mysteries, connecting dots, and coming up with suspects. This emotional roller coaster is part what makes Christie's stories so compelling. But what makes Agatha Christie especially brilliant is her ability to place these red herrings along real clues, so that when the final reveal of the crime happens, everything makes sense. The red herrings are logical, even though they don't lead to the real murder. Agatha Christie never cheats her readers, which leads us to the next storytelling technique Agatha Christie used: streamlining your plot. How did she do that, and what does it mean? Agatha Christie put more descriptive passages in the beginning of the books rather than at the end. This has the effect of streamlining her plots, so that we read more quickly towards the end of her books. The readers are literally rushing towards the end. Her sentences also are short and direct, and she moves her narratives forward through rapid dialogue between suspects. Have you noticed something in Agatha Christie's writing? Just look and listen at the following dialogue.
"I saw a murder once," said Joyce. "Don't be silly, Joyce," said Miss Whittaker, the school teacher. "I did," said Joyce. "Did you really?" asked Cathy, gazing at Joyce with wide eyes. "Really and truly see a murder?" "Of course she didn't," said Mrs. Drake. "Don't say silly things, Joyce." "I did see a murder," said Joyce. "I did. I did. I did."
And do you notice? Agatha Christie mostly used the word said rather than other words like replied or answered. But why does she do that? Christie liked to keep it simple. She was a strong believer in avoiding complex language and complex words that could alienate her readers. Instead, she used everyday language. But while Christie was not challenging you with her vocabulary, she was with the plot. By using easy and understandable sentences, the readers were free to focus on clues and suspect instead of the language used. Which leads us to another way Christie makes her readers addicted to her books is through her settings. Christie used a lot of enclosed settings in her novel, whether it be an island, like in Then There Were None, or a boat, like in Death on the Nile. But why does she do that? This act of forcing the characters together not only lets the characters easily interact with each other, it creates urgency.
Mr. Owen is one of us.
Take Murder on the Orient Express, for example. The confined setting of the train creates an atmosphere of claustrophobia, and as the tension builds, the stakes feel more personal. And not only that, through a snowstorm, all the characters are stuck on the train. They can't leave, and no one can come to help. The outside world becomes inaccessible. The passengers are cut off from communication with authorities and other people. You're stuck on this train with a criminal, so the danger feels real, which adds to the suspense. What if there occurs another murder? And can you find the criminal in time?
We must suspect each and every one among us.
Now, I warn everybody to be on his guard. If not, we shall all go the same way.
Here also comes to play Agatha Christie's rule of fair play. In her stories, the detective and the reader are equals. As a reader, nothing is hidden from you that isn't hidden from them. Christie follows a simple but effective rule. If the detective knows, so do you. But why is this so important? So as long as you're paying attention, you can solve the crime with the detective. And that's one of the reasons her mysteries are so satisfying. It's not just a story. It's a game trying to figure out who did it before the reveal. But here comes a question. How did Agatha Christie come up with these mind-blowing murder mysteries? Agatha Christie started every novel with the following questions: who did it? Why did they do it? When did the murder occur? How did it happen? And where did it happen? And not only that, in most of her novels, Agatha Christie uses a double plot. The main plot involves a murder, while on the other hand, the subplot involves a psychological trickster, a character that intentionally creates fear and chaos for the other characters. Usually this character is not the one that committed the murder, as this conclusion would be too obvious. It is usually a person who has a hidden agenda against the rest of the characters, and acts as a red herring. Because of these different plot lines, there's always interesting things happening, which entertain the reader and make him want to know more. So if you're writing a book, try using the mentioned storytelling techniques, and feel free to comment which storytelling techniques you're using to make your books more hooking. Thanks for watching.